Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right on KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today, as usual, my friends. First, Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, PPTV, Executive Director Dyana Limon-Mercado visited with us to discuss the draconian bills in the Texas Legislature that must be called what they are, an assault on women. Second, we have a discussion about a prescient message by LZ Granderson on a news show on Sunday about the America First Caucus and white supremacy. I want to talk a little bit about that. I have an important message I think we need to impart on America in general. And lastly, Tim Pagliara, author of Another Big Lie, How the Government Stole Billions from the American Dream of Home Ownership and Got Caught. He exposes the 2008 collapse myth. So we know everybody wanted to blame all those people that couldn't afford those mortgages, as if it's the common man that brought down the system. It wasn't the common man that brought down the system. It was the titans of finance, as we've always known. But folks, before we get started, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT, in your minds. Talk about it. Tell other friends about it. Tell them to tune in to 90.1 FM Houston or listen on kpft.org. Likewise, keep our 100,000 watt station that covers the entire Southeast Texas on air by donating what you can afford at our website, kpft.org. Please remember to do so in the name of Politics Done Right. Donate to kpft.org in the name of Politics Done Right. Lastly, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right. That is facebook.com/Politics Done Right, or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTOWILLIES. Again, the handle is EGBERTOWILLIES. Now, let's get busy. Today we have a very, very special guest. Today with us, we have the Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Votes, Dyana Limon-Mercado. Dyana, how are you doing today? Welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing good. I'm like everybody else, still working from home, vaccinated though, and looking forward hopefully to things returning to safe and healthy soonish.
Well, according to President Biden, we'll be back in July 4th. Things will be a lot better. I got my second vaccine as well. Did you get your second vaccine?
I did. Congratulations to you. Yes.
Yes. Now, I can tell you one thing. The second one really got to me, but I thought I was a macho man. I wasn't so macho after that second one at all.
I was doing okay. Me and my husband were both fine. And then I was able to help get all of my family vaccinated as well, got their first and second doses. So we are, one day at a time trying to get the rest of our neighborhoods and extended family vaccinated too, but things are definitely looking more promising.
That is great, Miss Hero Woman that didn't have second consequences like everybody else. That's why you're the leader of this group. Anyhow, why don't you tell me a little bit about Planned Parenthood Texas Votes? What exactly is it?
Yeah, Planned Parenthood Texas Votes is the nonpartisan advocacy, policy, and political arm of Planned Parenthood in Texas. We believe that healthcare cannot just be available, but that it must be accessible. We are a distinct, separate 501c4 organization for those people who know about legal statuses. And we work to advance the ability of Planned Parenthood to provide healthcare in our state by forging a social and political climate where healthcare is not just available, but is truly accessible. And we build Powerty to represent that majority view that abortion rights should be protected. And we do that through our advocacy work, leadership development, training programs, electoral campaigns, grassroots and community organizing. And everything we do really centers the voices, stories, and experiences of Planned Parenthood patients, young people, people of color, and those who are most impacted by these laws and who need access to reproductive health care and who are also the future of Texas.
Wow, you're very, you know that down pack. I guess you're the leader of it. You know exactly what you're doing. Actually, getting serious real here, that is such a necessity here in Texas. What exactly is the relationship between your organization and Planned Parenthood? How are you connected? How do you work together? And the reason I'm asking that is many a times those people that are against Planned Parenthood would try to create these types of fissures that obfuscate the lines between them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, like I said, is the advocacy and political arm. Planned Parenthood Texas Votes does not provide any health care. I am not a doctor or a nurse. Nobody on our staff is, but we work on behalf to represent our 3 Planned Parenthood affiliates in Texas who do, in particular, Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, which serves Houston, the southeast region of Texas, and Louisiana. Planned Parenthood Greater Texas, which serves Central Texas, North Texas, West Texas, all the way through the Panhandle to El Paso, and Planned Parenthood South Texas, which serves San Antonio all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley. So there are 3 distinct Planned Parenthood affiliates who do actually provide healthcare in Texas. Together, they operate 40 health centers, serve over 100,000 patients a year. And then we at Planned Parenthood Texas Votes represent them in the legislature and then do additional community organizing and leadership development programs that really uplift our legislative advocacy work and work towards our long-term vision of having a social and political climate that advances reproductive health care that includes having the full favor and support of both local and state government.
Now, I understand that your group is over a million large. Explain that to me, because you know, when you have that sort of reach, that gives you power and that gives you presence, especially out there at that legislature. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think many people know Planned Parenthood, right, to be a very recognizable brand across the country. Planned Parenthood has provided healthcare across the country for over 100 years, and Planned Parenthood has been providing healthcare in Texas for almost 90 years. 1 in 5 women will rely on Planned Parenthood in their lifetime. So when you've been around that long and have provided that much healthcare to that many people, are a constant source of trusted, reliable, quality, affordable healthcare, people believe, right, in your brand and what your brand represents to them, which is trust, accuracy, confidentiality, non-judgmental quality care. And so that translates into our advocacy and political work as well, with people knowing that Planned Parenthood has a mission and a brand and a voice that they can believe in. And so, you know, over the course of our work, we have built up a base of 1 million supporters strong who have taken action in support of Planned Parenthood. And that happens in all sorts of ways, which I'm sure you or many of your listeners have done, whether that is block walking, making phone calls, joining community groups, becoming a volunteer for, you know, any of the other ways that we work in advocacy work, or doing things like signing petitions, you know, and contacting your legislators on behalf of the organization. So we definitely have a very large active base who is very connected to our mission.
Before we get into Legi issues, you have a big job. You have to somehow go against or fight against the much of what people put out on Planned Parenthood, as if it's an organization that is not worth having. It's an organization that doesn't do the things that it does, as it's only an abortion organization. Tell me exactly how do you work on changing the narrative to make sure that yours is more powerful than those people who are pretty much misinforming the audience at large?
Yeah, I think for us, we are really focused on uplifting the real life experiences of everyday Texans, right? You can't deny that regular people are in need of healthcare, continue to access healthcare through Planned Parenthood, and that having access to healthcare is life-changing and life-saving. And so for us, it is truly about just uplifting the voices of patients who rely on Planned Parenthood and Texans who need access to reproductive health care. The truth can't be denied, as much as our opposition and other sides try to use misinformation campaigns and work against us. But at the end of the day, Planned Parenthood is providing healthcare in Texas to hundreds of thousands of people and across the country. And those are real experiences that other people can relate to, whether or not they have directly accessed healthcare through Planned Parenthood, know a friend or a family member, or have supported a friend or family member in accessing healthcare or in accessing abortion. It's easy to, I think, for opposition to think, to distance themselves from this because they themselves have not experienced it, or think that they don't know somebody who has experienced it. But the truth is, again, 1 in 5 women will rely on Planned Parenthood in their lifetime. 1 in 4 women will have an abortion in their lifetime, and 9 out of 10 women will use birth control in their lifetime. So these are very real issues that resonate across all communities, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all demographics. And we're just here to tell those stories, to tell the truth, and to make sure that people know that they can rely on Planned Parenthood for healthcare, and that we're doing everything we can through our advocacy to tell that story.
In my humble opinion, healthcare, I mean, first of all, I don't believe men have any place to in this particular battle, and second, which it seems like they're the ones who are always battling in it. But secondly, I also find it ironic that for a state that refuses to accept the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act, an institution as powerful and as effective as Planned Parenthood, that they have a problem funding it or making sure it's funded, and have nothing to replace it with its features with. Anyhow, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what's going on in the Texas Legislature, because you have a big fight on your hands to make sure that the people you care for, the people you're taking care of, are really taken care of. So tell me a little bit about those major bills that you're actually making sure that we have to ensure they're not passed.
Yeah, absolutely. I first just want to say, a lot of the care that we talk about women's health care and women's well-woman exams. And to your point right now, when we think about, sort of the historical fight around reproductive health care, it has been obviously very centered around women who are the majority of Planned Parenthood patients and in need of this specific kind of care. But Planned Parenthood does provide care to all people of all genders, gender identities, sexual orientation. Men's services are a growing part of the patient base of Planned Parenthood, as well as providing trans care for trans patients, including gender-affirming hormone therapy, among the many other great services Planned Parenthood provides, which also includes fertility assistance, vasectomies, primary care, on top of birth control, STI testing and treatment, and abortion, which many other people know about already. So it is definitely a big, diverse base of patients and their lifestyles and their needs that we're seeking to represent. And while I'm specifically talking about bills that are attacking abortion access today, there's a whole history of bills that have attacked family planning care, access to preventive care, cut Planned Parenthood out of family planning and preventive care programs like the breast and cervical cancer screening. And at the same time, the same people attacking reproductive health and rights are the same people attacking trans kids, trans patients, LGBTQ rights, right? At the end of the day, there are some fundamentally shared opposition here of people who want to control other people's bodily autonomy and sexual autonomy. And so for us, all of the work we do is rooted in really that foundation and understanding the intersection of these issues, and that Planned Parenthood patients lead multi-issue lives. This is not the only issue affecting their life, but in particular, there are a number of abortion bills that are moving fast through the legislature right now. There are so many, oh my gosh. We had over 45 bills further restricting abortion access in Texas filed. As many of your followers probably know, abortion is already, in Texas, is already incredibly restricted. It is one of the safest medical procedures in America, and is at the same time the most restricted medical procedure in Texas. And then Texas has some of the most restrictive laws in the country. So on top of that, there were 45 more bills filed, 6 of which are moving particularly quick. One that would ban abortion before many people even know they're pregnant, a 6-week ban on abortion. Yeah. So for people who have regular menstrual cycles, you think about that happening in a 4-week period. So just 2 weeks after a missed period, abortion could already be outlawed. on top of the other barriers the state has already put in place. So the state already requires 24-hour waiting period. The state already requires a mandatory sonogram. The state has already diminished access so that like you can't just call a clinic and get an appointment the same day, or even sometimes in the same week, in the same 7 days. So the amount of time it takes to confirm a pregnancy, for a patient to consider their options, make a decision, call and schedule an appointment, and comply with all of the other state requirements is already beyond 6 weeks for most patients. There are also some other bills that would put into place what's called a trigger ban, which is to say if the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade or Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which are really the foundations of access, of precedent that we rely on for access to abortion, that Texas would automatically within 30 days ban abortion access altogether. And then there's some other bills that really get into the weeds of patient care and access, some that require additional counseling on top of all of the state mandated counseling that already takes place and the 24-hour waiting period. Bills that get into banning abortion based on people's particular reason. So the state government trying to say, if you're having an abortion for this reason, that's not okay, which people have choose abortions for a complex variety of reasons, and those decisions should be personal and private, right? Any healthcare decision you're making should be personal and private, and the government shouldn't be intervening in those decisions. And then other bills that restrict access on certain type of procedures, and even ones that attack specifically the city of Austin, which has been particularly supportive of abortion access and trying to provide support where the state has cut women off. Particularly the city of Austin provides additional funding for things like transportation, lodging, and childcare for people accessing abortion. So the city of Austin does not actually provide funding to cover abortion, but they provide access funding for all of the supports the person needs to access abortion. And so the state is also attacking that as well. So those are just a couple. There's a whole bunch more, but those are the ones that are being fast tracked at the moment. They've already passed the Senate and they're currently in the House.
Now, one silly question. How many of those bills were proposed by women?
I think one of them was, and that was the last one that I was just mentioning on the practical support for abortion access. So covering childcare for a person having an abortion. Again, in Texas, because there are so many restrictions in place, abortion access is a multi-visit, multi-day process. There's a 24-hour waiting period. That already includes state mandated information. So you have to get that on day one, plus your mandatory sonogram the state requires, and then day two. What many people, or doesn't come across, I think, in the opposition's argument is that truthfully, 2 out of 3 women who choose abortion are already parents and have already had a child. So for them, they may be living paycheck to paycheck. They're in a job that doesn't provide paid time off. They don't have health insurance. And they do have children and families to take care of. And so being able to take off multiple days of work, because 90%, I think it's around 90% of the state's counties don't have abortion clinics in them. So many people are having to travel multiple days who already have children. So this bill would cut off them from even having financial assistance to cover childcare while they're trying to access critical healthcare for themselves, or covering a tank of gas for somebody who has to travel 300 miles to get the healthcare they need. So that one in particular is authored by a woman. Unfortunately, it has a companion authored in the Senate by a woman. The legislature overall is men, and we know that women are 52% of the electorate, and it would be lovely to see the state legislature represent the true electorate of Texas.
And maybe we're looking at one of our next Congress people right now on the other side of the screen. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. I don't want to get on my soapbox. This is I want to hear what you have to say, but it's completely depressing that so many cannot understand that this is an economic issue. And it's a biased economic issue because it only really affects women in the aggregate. It's just it's unbearable that folks don't see that. Now, your fight within the legislature so far has been very defensive, and I don't know how you're going to answer this question. But when the hell are we going to get on the offensive? In other words, what am I trying to say here? this is tantamount, the attack on women through these types of legislations, in my opinion, and I'm a man talking, you can tell me to shut up if necessary, but it is tantamount to disempowering women. It is tantamount to putting a chain on women. And in my humble opinion, why aren't we, I don't want to say marketing, but why aren't we putting these issues out in that fashion to show that it is having a boot on the neck of women? Men putting the boot on the neck of women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, women know, right? Being able to have control of over your reproductive health and your reproductive journey and your reproductive life is the key factor in being able to choose your professional goals, your educational goals, right? For women, the number one reason they either don't complete high school or higher education is because of an unplanned pregnancy, right? And when you're not able to complete your education or pursue, right, your professional opportunities, then you're not ever able to lift you and yourself, your family out of poverty or living paycheck to paycheck. Absolutely. That it is, all of these issues are connected. Economic issues are connected to reproductive health, rights, and justice issues. Unfortunately, the opposition does not care about that, right?
No, Miss Limon-Mercado, let me kind of centralize my question a bit more. I find when we had the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act debate, we never used language like the Republican-run Texas Legislature. I know you guys are not partisan. I understand that. But this is me talking. You've never said the Texas Legislature is effecting murder on the Texas people, because if the consequences of what you do causes the death of people, then you are knowingly causing harm to others. You're knowingly killing people. Putting the same type of narrative on your issues, it's apropos. Why isn't it done?
I think for us, we have supporters like you who are with us no matter what. You and I understand how extreme and far-reaching these bills and restrictions are, and how they deeply impact people's lives and entire communities in these very real and severe ways. Right, the opposition has a whole other counter argument about that. And for us, for changing the future of Texas, changing the narrative, shifting the culture, building the Texas we want to see, right, it's really about appealing to and educating and engaging the people in the middle, right? Which a third of the people are with us, a third of the people on the other side, and we get a third of the people in the middle. A third of the people in the middle, they don't necessarily see it as clearly as you've just described it. And so our work really tries to give them an entry point into the fight for justice in the bigger sense that you just explained, how everything is connected. And so for us, it's about bringing sort of those people in who are in that middle third, giving them education, engagement, awareness, and opportunities to experience what you just laid out for themselves, right? People have to put it into very real terms for what their life has been like and what their community and what their family is experiencing. So we just think it's, for our strategy, and there are many groups that have different strategies, and at the end of the day, they're all working together. But for us, it is really about, thinking about the future of Texas, winning the hearts and mind of, the people who are in the middle, and giving them the education and engagement that they need to chart that path and to establish those informed opinions that you just laid out for themselves. Because we think it's more effective to let somebody experience it than to tell them, this is what's happening, right? We bring them in and we give them an opportunity to see it for themselves and to help bring some awareness to themselves and to those around them.
Excellent. Ms. Limon-Mercado, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't ask you?
Oh my gosh. Well, these were already so many good questions. I really appreciate your support and time on this. I will say, in addition to all of the defensive work we are doing, we are working actively, right, to build the future that we want to see in Texas. And we know that we can't just be fighting against the bad bills and against what we don't want, but we really have to lay out a vision for the future we want. And so we do have a whole other set of bills that we're working on. One called the Free Choice of Provider Act that would actually rescind all of the restrictions that are currently in place that prevent Planned Parenthood from participating in things like the breast and cervical cancer program and the state family planning programs, the Healthy Texas Women program. We would really like to see a Texas where every Texan, regardless of income, immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, income level, geography, could access the healthcare they truly need from the provider that they trust most. In addition, and that bill, I really love that bill. It's historic, not only because it's the first time we filed it, but because the authors of the bill, Representative Ramos from the Dallas area and Senator Eckhart from the Austin area, they themselves are former Planned Parenthood patients. And so having Planned Parenthood patients filing historic legislation for Planned Parenthood patients is right the narrative that we're talking about. Lots of people rely on this type of healthcare, and it was so important to their own personal journeys that eventually got them to the legislature, and it is so important for many other Texans who need this healthcare so they can truly realize their best healthy selves. And then we're also working on another bill in coalition with our other great partners at organizations like AVAL, formerly NARO Pro-Choice Texas, Texas Freedom Network, Progress Texas, Deeds Networks, Little Fund, T-Fund, many of the organizations that people in our movement love and support. And that bill is called the Abortion is Healthcare Act. And that bill would actually rescind about a dozen restrictions that currently exist on abortion access that we talked about. Mandatory sonogram, 24-hour waiting period, the state's mandated misinformation. And so all of those are about laying the groundwork in the legislature with our supporters and in broader communities to bring people into this fight, to really lay out the vision for the Texas we really want to see in the future. And we're starting that work on now. We know it's a marathon, not a sprint, so we've got a long way to go, but there are incredibly dedicated advocates and organizations that we're a part of the same ecosystem with them that are really committed to this long-term work. And I think we are, substantially changing the narrative around reproductive health care and abortion access. And so there are some good things on the horizon. We are working with lots of great partners to move those things forward. And I know with, the support of the majority of Texans who are with us and do believe access to abortion should be safe and legal, that we'll, in the near-ish future, we'll be seeing some significant changes, both in the makeup of the legislature and in the public policies that they're putting out.
Ms. Dyana Limon-Mercado, Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much for having me today. It was a great conversation.
Today on This Week, I saw a work of art, in my humble opinion. I wish more journalists would do this when they appear on these panels. LZ Granderson, I want you to listen to this, and then let's go ahead and take it on the other side.
LZ, we got 10 seconds left here, but really at the heart of this is immigration. What do they do about it?
Well, I know we're talking about immigration, Martha, but I really want to address something that we talked about just previously in terms of Marjorie Greene and that particular caucus. In denouncing her, many Republicans talked about how America wasn't built on these ideas. The reality is this country was built on white supremacy. And the reason why she supported is because white supremacy is still very much a part of the American fabric. So until we can acknowledge that, we're going to constantly be addressing these racial issues, particularly as it pertains to
we're going to have to end there, but you made your point.
And, very rarely do you get a chance to, just go ahead and you be the one making the subject and not getting cut off. He took that 38 seconds and he did everything that he needed to do with that 38 seconds. Let's get the police portion out of the way. Everybody they're really hitting hard on how bad these police officers are, right? And I tell people all the time, police officers are a reflection of who we are. The only difference is they have a license to kill. So we are seeing the ultimate effect of who we are instantiated on the bodies of many. Now, here's the issue. As long as we maintain this fallacy that except for that little thing called slavery, except for that little thing where we had the Trail of Tears, where we murdered and threw a whole lot of indigenous people off their lands. Instead of us breaking all these treaties that we've had with different indigenous countries on this land and taking their land, except for how we treated Asians as they came over and built our railroad and gave some many other services, except for how we deal with those people repatriating lands that were originally generations in their families. Except for all these things, we were founded on great Christian principles. For all those that didn't benefit from the wonderfulness of that, it creates a fallacy. It creates an image that doesn't square with reality. So as we speak about being a democracy, we are very anti-democratic in the way we elect a Senate, in the way we elect a president, in the way we elect Congress people with gerrymandering, etc. We have all these undemocratic features built into our system to keep a few in power. When we wrote a constitution, which in effect truly, and this is not meaning to be mean, it was a racist document identifying some people in this country as 3/5 of a person. It was indeed a sexist document, meaning there was no area where women could actually vote. We have to really come to the concept that for those who say, well, it was a document of its time, that's fine. But also understand that in those times, we took it as okay to do so much harm to so many. And by the way, it isn't harm just to people of a particular hue. It isn't harm just to people of a particular gender. It is also harm to people of little means. It is also harm to people who didn't have land. But we always gave them that aspiration that if they just follow the rules, they would be able to be like us, as long as they don't have that hue, as long as they don't have that gender. So it was worth a few with arms fighting for. Until we accept the reality of who we are and we start making or codifying who we claim to be and act on that codification, nothing is going to change. And that's why cycle after cycle after cycle, we go through what we're going through. That little statement that LZ Granderson made is so important. And if we absorb the essence of that statement, it's a start, it's the beginning of doing what we need to do. We are here today with a special guest. Tim Pagliara will talk to us about something that affects most. Tim Pagliara is Forbes book author of Another Big Lie: How the Government Stole Billions from the American Dream of Home Ownership and Got Caught. Pagliara is founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of Cap Wealth, an independent SEC registered investment advisory firm near Nashville, Tennessee. He was named by Forbes as the #1 financial advisor in Tennessee in 2020. Tim, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
Terrific.
Well, you know, before we get into the guts of what I want to talk about, did the government still steal billions of dollars?
Yes, they did.
Really? You're going to have to really explain that to me. Anyhow, first of all, let's get busy about what is Fannie Mae and what is Freddie Mac. People use that. Everybody uses it when they're going to buy their home, etc., etc., etc. But really deep down inside, they don't know what it is. So before we get started, let's get a baseline. What is Fannie Mae? What is Freddie Mac?
It's easier to start with Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was created in 1938 by FDR and Treasury Secretary Morgenthau. And it was designed to fill a hole, a gap that existed in our financial system. The unemployment rate was 25%, home prices dropped 50%. And in that kind of environment, the regulators tell the banks, don't loan, clean up your balance sheets, do all of that. And so that's what we describe as a pro-cyclical business model. So people were being thrown out of their homes, put to the streets. You remember those images?
Oh, yeah.
So Fannie Mae was created they bought loans, mortgages from banks. They restructured them, and the 30-year mortgage was born at that point and created affordable payments. Prior to that, in 1938, the average home mortgage was less than 5 years. And so how do you requalify to get a new loan if you don't have a job and housing prices are dropping? So it created a measure of financial security that had not existed. It solved a problem in the system. Freddie Mac was
before I want to make sure that we have this clear to the audience. So you're saying Fannie Mae was created it's sort of an insurance company for big banks, correct?
Well, actually, no. What it does, they buy. So in your community, a small community bank, they will take an application for a mortgage, and they will put that into Fannie Mae criteria. Then Fannie Mae will buy that mortgage from your local bank, and then they package them up and they sell them to insurance companies and others.
Actually, I understood that, and my bad. I shouldn't have said big banks. I just meant for banks. In other words, what it did, it's an insurance company, what you just explained, that says, I can give the loan, I can make all this money off of giving loans to people, the closing costs, etc. And if I follow the Fannie Mae rules, I can then sell that paper to Fannie Mae, who then will package it as some sort of a financial instrument. True?
Exactly. Perfect.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
So I have some issues with that, but we can talk about that later on. Now, what exactly is Freddie Mac?
Freddie Mac was created in the late 60s to provide the same service to the savings and loan industry. So it was specialized to the savings and loan industry, and they would purchase loans from them to increase the amount of borrowing and lending that they could do at the savings and loan level.
Wow, very informational. And what's the difference between a bank and a savings and loan? Why we needed two different platforms?
Well, back then when we had that rigid structure, which was basically broken down, we don't have that anymore. So that's why today Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae operate simultaneously, synonymously, and they're somewhat competitors of each other.
But savings and loans still exist, correct?
Not in the structure, the regulatory structure that they did in the 60s and 70s and early part of the 80s. So they're not the regulated entity that they were before, the franchise that they were. So they may be called a savings and loan, but it's not the same regulatory structure that existed.
Okay, now let me give you a picture of what I saw in 2008 and the narrative that I generally put out for 2008. And that is, what we had was the financial sector making big hay, creating financial instruments like derivatives upon derivatives, which became cyclical till we had the house of cards that fell on itself. But then, again, I'm telling you my narrative, I'd like to be corrected by you. But then after all of that occurred, we needed to find a scapegoat that gave the financial sector a buy. And what we did is we said, well, Fannie Mae started giving loans to a whole bunch of people, or rather, allowing the affection of loans to a whole bunch of people that couldn't afford homes, and they crashed the market. Government did that. Tell me I'm wrong.
That's the narrative that existed, and it has been debunked by the St. Louis Federal Reserve. But more importantly, the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission, 92% of all the loans that went bad in the financial crisis were originated in the private sector, private label mortgage-backed securities. So despite the fact that Fannie and Freddie had over twice, almost 3 times the amount of business, their loan losses were tremendously lower than what was issued by, say, Citibank and the other big banks that were just engaged in reckless lending practices.
Didn't you just make my case, my friend?
I did. I agree with you 100%.
Okay, great. I'm just checking because, I don't know. But anyhow, so tell me, how did the bank, Well, let's start it this way, because you have some discussion points that actually, I am surprised your discussion points are this good coming from, I mean, it is pretty good. So let's start this way. What does your book unveil about the 2008 crash?
That there was a fraud, and the fraud was that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac caused the financial crisis. They did not. It was the big banks that engaged in reckless lending practices that caused the crisis. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have always been the champion of the little guy in providing home mortgages.
Agreed.
And
now,
those people that bought homes and saved to get in their home, they were not the problem. The problem was the speculation that was created by poor regulation of the large banks, money center banks.
That is so amazing, and that is one of the reasons, folks. I'm going to repeat this during this show or our interview, because I want people to get your book. Go get that book, because many folks are misleading you. Another big lie: how the government stole billions from the American dream of home ownership. I'll have that link in here, but to understand our entire financial structure, this is an important part that you should have, folks. The link is going to be in the bottom of the blog. Tim, explain which banks, how did these banks actually manipulate the system to really pull out and then come begging to us all at the end?
Well, take, for example, Countrywide, which was a mortgage loan originator. They engaged in reckless speculation, fraud. They had these no-income loans. Anyone could get a loan without proving whether or not they were capable of paying it back. So these banks kept issuing more and more loans. They were like playing with the house money, and the taxpayers were on the hook for all of it.
That is amazing. I want to put a quick story. This is your interview, but I want to put a quick story that really burned me. A friend of mine, still a friend, went to Vegas and bought a home that was really worth no more than $200,000 and took out $1 million loan on that home. Okay, and I said, "You'll never be able to sell that home for that. Who gave you? Who appraised that home for you?" Well, it's done. I said, "You don't ever intend to pay that back, do you?" He said, smiled. He never answered. He just smiled. And that goes into something that you've just said there. How could we have allowed that to occur, and whose fault was that?
Yeah, that was the regulator's fault. That's what Dodd-Frank was all about, trying to correct it. The ironic part about this, I have always said Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth of the financial crisis. They had to push them into service to save the system. They had no other way of doing it because the big banks had created such a mess. And I document every bit of it in the book.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's been a process. It started with a disagreement with Senator Corker, who he and Mark Warner, for example, they had a bet against the housing system. Mark Warner and Bob Corker bet against America.
Stop. That is new to me, and I thought I was read. Explain that to me again. Are you saying they shorted the market? That they shorted that market?
Yes. They owned a credit default swap
called
Abacus 18 that was buried in a hedge fund called the Pointer Fund. And this is all in my book. It's all in the research. They bet against America. So they bet that the housing prices would go down, and they made between $25 and $50 million a piece, shorting the system. The counterparty to Abacus 18 was American International Group, AIG. So it was issued by Goldman Sachs. The counterparty was AIG. And when they bailed out AIG and Corker voted for it, he essentially voted for his own bailout because that credit default swap would have failed. And from that point forward, Corker and Warner were advocates for a big bank solution that would have cut out the very people that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were created to serve.
Tim, that's a hell of an allegation against two senators. Well, I think one's gone now. That's a hell of an allegation. Why isn't that all over the place?
It was documented in an article that Bethany McLean wrote in Yahoo Finance, but everybody glossed over it. No one wanted to deal with it. Abacus 18 was the largest single investment in the United States Senate through disclosures for a 2-year period from 2007 to 2010. And Corker and Warner owned it.
You know, I'm still in shock. You know, that is a shocker to me. And you know what is interesting? Because I've always said, you know, the bankers are able to do what they do because they owned both sides. And you're just proving that right there. $25 million a piece. Is that documented, that the actual profit that they made, $25 million a piece?
In Senate ethics disclosure, they give a range. They give a range of what they owned and what they made. And it's somewhere between $25 and $50 million a piece.
That is astounding. And it's, I mean, it just shows you the power of banking, that wasn't picked up by other networks, because that I think that should be something that somebody talks about all of the time. It's
the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal wouldn't write the story. Matt Taibbi at Rolling Stone had a 12,000-word article written.
Yes.
You know, Matt, great journalist.
Yes.
And Rolling Stone stopped the article in August of 2017 when Corker was attacking Trump, because it served Rolling Stone's interest to have him attacking Trump rather than deal with what was going on in the mortgage industry and mortgage finance reform and housing reform. So this was all big bank centered. And they have been attempting to drive a big bank solution that takes away from those homeowners. That's why I said they got caught. They tried to redirect billions and billions of dollars away from the American dream of home ownership.
You know what is ironic when you talk about these guys they bet against America, and betting against America because the system was about to crash. More than likely, those credit default swaps were worth nil because it was based on one that already failed, right?
That's right.
And that's why they've got the big bailout, right? Because now all those guys are made whole.
Yeah, in August of 2007, we have it on Corker's financial disclosures. He sold every stock, everything he owned in his account. And 45 days later, he had a net short position on the US economy. He had been briefed by Treasury about the difficulties that were going to occur with the Financial Accounting Standard Board rule in November of 2007. He knew these problems were coming. There were people that were tipped off that knew these problems were coming, and they shorted the system. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac got caught up in all of that.
You know, I am still in shock. Now, let's go a little bit further now. Tell me a little bit more about what people who get your book are going to find shocking. I don't know if as shocking as what you just said, but tell us a little bit more.
Well, first of all, it'll educate them about the housing system and the origins, like where we started, 1938 to the present. It will also give them a good understanding of the inner workings of government and the big money interests and how they attempt to buy off the system and how the system goes back and forth in this endless battle of money and special interest groups. The Wells Fargo, for example, benefited more than any other bank in the United States from the initial proposals that were made to restructure Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which would essentially have shut them down and made a big bank-centric model. Well, during that same period of time, we're talking about Senator Corker. He had a $62 million non-recourse loan through a partnership he was engaged in that Wells Fargo provided him. Now, how's that happen? What does non-recourse mean? You probably don't know it. I don't know it because we've got to pay our loans back. A non-recourse loan is a loan you don't have to pay back. And so because it was non-recourse, Corker didn't have to disclose it on his financial statements. So we never knew that conflict of interest even existed. So that's what they'll find out. They'll get a feel about that. They will see how the government leaked information about their plans to put Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in conservatorship, documented emails, Freedom of Information Act requests. It's all there in the book. And then we tie it up in December 9th, the United States Supreme Court heard oral argument about the theft of this $350 billion from the housing system. They will issue their opinion sometime in May, maybe early June. And what's ironic, the most liberal members of the court, led by Justice Breyer, said, you nationalized these companies. You stole these companies. He's talking about the government. The government nationalized these companies. And that's the story, to the detriment of the American homeowner.
Let me ask you a little something. In effect, they nationalized the company, meaning we had sort of a social solution to a problem that shouldn't have been. In other words, we paid all the debts to get out of there. What is the recourse? Because in effect, what we did is we gave away a whole lot of money to a whole bunch of rich people. What's the solution?
The solution is to set these entities up, have them adequately capitalized, have them reflect what we've learned from the financial crisis with the kind of regulation that we need, and let them get on with the business of helping American homeowners for the next generation of home ownership. That's what we need to do.
Let me see if I understand what you're saying right. You're saying you want a robust Fannie Mae, a robust Freddie Mac, correct? Is that what you're pretty much saying?
Adequately capitalized for the taxpayer for the next generation of home ownership.
And let me stop you right there, because as I read about you, you're a capitalist. I'm not. You're a capitalist. Fine, that's great. And you're saying this. Explain yourself.
Well, I grew up working in a grocery store. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. Just because I'm a capitalist, I understand how hard it is, how hard people have to work. And I understand the wealth creation that comes with owning a home and the pride that comes with owning a home. I know how good it is for American people to be vested that way. So you've got to do things to support the system and to eliminate, like I said, there's a flaw. Any system has flaws. The exhaust port of the Death Star made it vulnerable in Star Wars. So this is the same type of thing. We fixed a flaw in the system that will make it more stable, and it will ensure that Americans actually get to own and maintain their homes in good times and bad.
Tell me a little bit about Investors Unite.
That was an organization that I started. It's an advocacy group. Initially, again, and it's this push-pull that goes on with the financial interest, they blamed this whole issue on hedge funds and the property rights that hedge funds were attempting to assert. So they tried to put a bad face on it. Well, that wasn't the case. Investors Unite, we've got teachers, firemen, police officers, pension funds, individual business owners. They are the shareholders of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's their property interests that I wanted to put a face on. Those are my clients. And so I started this organization to represent my clients and to represent everybody else similarly situated around the country.
Tim Pagliara, the last question, and I always ask this one, and it's the most difficult one. What would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
I hope that if people that read the book, in addition to what I talked about with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the system cries out for financial disclosure reform. I would have liked for you to ask me, about how important that is and how that would have solved a lot of these problems, because we would have known about Corker's
so tell me,
financial interest. We have to have an independent commission to look at it. It's an easy thing to solve. When you have rules for financial disclosure that are being written by the people that don't want to disclose, that's a problem. And so the loopholes that exist allowed guys like Bob Corker to have a $60 million non-recourse loan with Wells Fargo while he sat on the Senate Banking Committee and wrote rules that affected them. How can you do that? How can you have that type of system that allows for that? How can you bet against America by buying a credit default swap and then bail out the very insurance company that was the counterparty that created it? So at the heart of all of it, we've got to follow the money. We've got to have reform, financial disclosure reform, and new rules to keep this from happening again.
Tim Pagliara is Forbes book author of Another Big Lie: How the Government Stole Billions from the American Dream of Home Ownership and Got Caught. He's also the founder and chief investment officer of Cap Wealth. Mr. Pagliara is a capitalist. I call him a free enterpriser that fits perfectly within our world. Mr. Pagliara, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Again, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT, in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends to tune into 90.1 FM Houston or listen to kpft.org. Keep us on air by donating what you can afford at our website, kpft.org. Once again, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright, facebook.com/politicsdoneright, or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies. Egberto is spelled EGBERTO WILLIES. Folks, that is it for today. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out! Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.